So we thought we'd start with a question to each of you. It's going to be the same question. You'll each answer it from your own perspectives. And the question is, in your view, what are likely to be the key challenges and opportunities for arts organizations' relevance and legitimacy in the coming decades? And that, by arts organizations, that can focus on the council, or it can focus on arts organizations, non-government arts organizations, arts institutions, and the like. And what can they learn from their past that will help inform their future? So who wants to jump in? Or should I just start putting people on the hot seat?
You put on the hot
Put
seat.
you on the, okay, there you go, John, you're on.
I will admit to actually being involved in arts and culture in this country, predating the Canada Council. So I have observed the incredible changes which have taken place in this country in so many ways, in every way. And the role that the council has played, which has been an extraordinary and positive role. And we're facing many challenges and usually chronic underfunding, which is at the heart of everything. And so, yes, and in fact, the funding issue, I would always put at the top of my list of challenges for the future, because we're experiencing around the world rapid changes in perception of governments, rapid changes in populist movements which are arising. We've seen the damage which could be caused by a government withdrawing funds on a big scale, major scale, from the arts funding bodies and agencies. And this can happen like that. And we have, yes, at this particular moment in time, the Canada Council is being favored by the existing government. We only have to look back at the decade before to see what happened, or in fact what didn't happen, through indifference and neglect, if not hostility. I'm a free agent, I can say but what I wanted to start off by saying that Monica and with Philip Cercone's obvious backing have produced a wonderful book. They have traced the history very well. And perhaps the most important part of it is that they have, and Monica has, identified these 5 ongoing tensions. And there's no question in my mind that when you read the history in here, particularly the one chapter of the history, so much remains the same. Those same struggles remain the same in terms of supporting the supply side, developing a whole artistic community which did not exist when I began my work in this country. And what we have today, which is the most extraordinary proliferation of talent, of great talent. So yes, so much has been done, and yet we're still facing the fact that many people in Canada still regard the arts as a frill. It is expendable. It is not seen as absolutely essential to the encouragement of creativity and innovation on which our country depends, and which the future prosperity of the country depends.
I come from the United States, and the idea of government funding arts is a bit odd to me anyway. But let me look ahead a bit. I had the opportunity for a couple of years to run a program called Leadership Nouveau, looking at the impact of arts institutions of forces like localization and technology. So this is a play off that. I think the Arts Council in the next years will be under enormous pressure to redefine its purpose, and to redefine the purpose in the context of capacity. And the reason is we're in the midst of a huge set of explosions which will affect the arts world and arts institutions enormously. If you remember, anyone older than old enough, Al Jolson used to say, "You ain't seen nothing yet." And that's about where we stand. Let me just try to say these quickly. The explosion of arts forms. One of the big arguments in New York recently was the fact, the fate of a very large, erect penis painted on four stories of a Soho wall. Quite elaborately painted, nicely done. And the question was, should it be preserved? Was it an art form? But the fact of the matter is, graffiti is now a major art form. Tomorrow there'll be an auction at Christie's. God willing, I'll sell a painting there, and I'm so happy. And a basket will sell for tens of millions of dollars. I mean, but you're also talking about simple stuff like fashion. The biggest draw at the Met are the fashion shows. What about digital art that comes and goes? So the art forms. And secondly, the explosion of arts delivery. It's not just, although very heavily on different forms of digitalization, but we can find different kinds of museums, different kinds of galleries, different kinds of delivery by different forms of technology. Music is the simplest. Rarely do we sit together like this and listen to music. We listen to bugs in our ears. We listen occasionally together to a CD. But a friend of mine works for a major music company. He says, Stephen, we run $1 billion company on nickels and dimes, which is what people pay for this stuff. So the explosion of arts forms, arts delivery, but there's another explosion. Explosion in demands on arts institutions. As a kid in 3rd grade in Pittsburgh, and I guess it would be 1949 or something, I walked in reverentially to the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh. They let me come in to this cathedral if I was quiet and I didn't touch anything. And I felt that. Now, of course, the demands of us, let's say, we look at the Met or other places, not only are to have more institutions, nor capacity in the building, but to reach out into the community. And moreover, we're told we have responsibility for solving all sorts of social problems of the community. Gender issues, diversity issues, equality issues. All these things now come back and say, what is the role of arts institutions, particularly when they're publicly funded? Finally, there's a money issue. Of course there is. But it isn't that there isn't a lot of money. Let us just think of $400 million spent for the so-called, the maybe Leonardo a few weeks ago at Sotheby's. But the fact is, there is a ton of money. It's just in funny places. There was a time when, again, the foundation of the Met, when Morgan and all gave money to the Met. It was admittedly an old boys club, that's what it was. But now we have a dozen new museums in the area of individuals. There's a museum just north in the city, it's rather lovely, I won't say the name, some of you might know, next to a gentleman's polo field. It's the Major Warhol Museum. It's his own stuff. How do you figure out dealing with that kind of money? And not only is it lots of money, it's young money. Young people with enormous amounts of money now sitting on the boards. Again, we don't. How does that play out? How do you deal with this kind of? So my point is that what has been done so far, which Monica reported so well, that's over. That era is really over. It may well be that the future of the Arts Council is to choose a much smaller array of activities and do them better, but to try and encompass this whole exploding, expanding arts world, arts and culture world. And it's just not going to be possible. So, I think I tend to be pessimistic. I'm an old guy, I'm pessimistic. But the excitement in the arts world is amazing. All the stuff that is happening. But how do you, and should you, manage it to keep any form to it, to try and ensure gender equality, or that resources go to the poor, to get a diverse audience rather than all white arts, and so on and so on and so. How do you do that? And I think these are enormous. And what I wonder is, if the arts institutions, including the council, have now the capacity, the human capacity to deal with that transition? Or will they simply be overwhelmed in the next few years by the multiplicity of demands and these explosions? So that's my story. My wife is sticking to it.
Thanks. I'm most used to talk about the Canada Council in my role as an arts advocate, being very biased and subjective. So please allow me to take up that hat and be more critical, and if so, please don't hold it against me. So in terms of challenges, I agree with all of the challenges that have been talked about so far, but the one that strikes me as being the largest, not insurmountable challenge has to do with technology. Canada Council was created at a time when states were at the top of the institution chain. That has changed because now we have supranational corporations that are driving technological changes at a very, very fast pace and in a very, very closed fashion. We don't know what their algorithm is, how it's built, how it works. We don't know what they're holding it for us because they're planning for the devices to be obsolete very fast. So these changes are happening fast. You mentioned AI. People nowadays are starting to search information using vocal assistants, which means that in the future, they will no longer see a series of answers on the page. They will get one answer. If that answer is not the arts, we're in trouble. In terms of possibilities, you also talked about social and values changes, and the fact that we are perhaps in a more individualist era. I would like to hope that there's an opportunity to bring a sense of balance and enable us to be together in this space that we inhabit with the arts.
Thank you. And I would like to start my remarks by acknowledging that we are in the lands of the Algonquin people, and we thank them for their generosity in sharing this land with us. So I thank you. And I am cautiously optimistic about the potential for arts institutions. I say cautious because I think it would require a lot of imagination, a lot of thought, a lot of work. But I'm cautiously optimistic because of that wonderful quotation, and thank you, Monica, for the quotation from Brooke Flack. That I think it is a super quotation, and I would like to use it. The people to make better use of their capacities. I think that is a wonderful quotation, and a really something that we should stick to. I want to actually tell an anecdote, which is about and it's about the potential for arts institutions, but the cautious potential. I run a little program with the Mission, which is our neighbor to the north. The Mission, and we run a program for people from the Mission, homeless people from the Mission, and we run a course on university level courses. And it's been going, and it's a lovely program. And I just want to tell about one story. One of the people who taught a course on portraits. And so because she knew about this, she took the entire class to the National Gallery on one of the free nights, and they got a tour from one of the people. And these were, I know absolutely none of the people in that class had ever gone to the National Gallery. They regarded it as a space that was not theirs, that a space that they were held out of because of class privilege, white privilege, whatever kinds of privilege. So the anecdote is the next week there was a free night. She was going, this friend of mine who was teaching the course was going back, and who did she see charging into the National Gallery, proud as anything, but part of the class who had discovered that the National Gallery had these lovely things that they had never thought about, never heard, never knew, and they wanted to pursue some of the portraits. They found some of these portraits really interesting, and they wanted to learn more about them. So there they were coming up. And what this tells to me is that what we need to do is open the opportunities, and I go back to Brooke Claxton, people to make better use of their capacities. There are all kinds of people in Canadian society, and I relate it mostly to class, because this is definitely a class division of the people who are in this course at Discovery U, but who do not feel they belong to those institutions. But once they go there, they love them, because of course they love them. There's lovely things in them, and they know. But so why wouldn't they love them? But they had never thought they could cross that door. And so I think the challenge is to make these institutions, and it will require thought and thinking about how you do it, and it will require working with people, because you can't just tell people, come on in, everybody, but you've got to work with them and do things that they will be interested in. But I think that there is, and as I say, I'm an optimist, that there is a lot of space for arts institutions working in, probably in individual, but also working in and your question of coalitions, it's all about coalitions, but learning what somebody else has done that's a good idea, or somebody did and it was a terrible idea, and nobody came at all and it was very embarrassing. So I think we can learn a lot from each other, but I think that on grounds of, and I've based it on class, but I think we could also do it on race and probably gender and in a number of divisions of Canadian society. But I think there's a whole world for the arts institutions to create them or rethink themselves in terms of bringing in people who have just never dared to go in the door. Thank you.
Some of the common themes coming through that I've heard in a lot of the remarks are about collaboration, capacity. I don't think I heard the word leadership anywhere. Whose responsibility is it, or what organization's responsibility is it to lead in this context? Or do we not need leadership, we just need collaboration, and we should just build more capacity around collaboration? Okay, Carolyn, do you want to just grab it?
I'll just grab it again and say, of course we need leadership, but we need leadership at absolutely every level. The woman who taught this part-time course showed leadership. She actually took them to the museum. The museums can take leadership. I think we can all take leadership. I really think that leadership is huge, but leadership needs to come from everybody. It isn't only a position of leadership, it's an action of leadership. It's taking whatever step you can take to go towards a goal. So I think totally cooperation is necessary. I wouldn't be in the Center on Governance if I didn't think getting together was really important. But I think leadership is really important.
Oh, guys.
I'm really glad we only have 2 mics for a second.
About leadership, it's important to know that leadership exists in between people, and that's probably the kind of leadership that is the most transformative. But as we are facing the challenges we talked about, namely technology, yes, some leadership is needed, which brings a question of followership, one of your attention. And it is a dramatic question, a dramatic tension. I could think of music and plays, but this is a different kind of tension for sure. With technology, the kind of challenge that we need to tackle requires a lot of technical knowledge that needs to be passed on to people whose job is to create art. So it brings on a need for different kinds of skill set, a different kind of knowledge. I'll tell you briefly about an experience that I had. I was at a panel along with Sylvie Gilbert, who runs the Digital Strategy Fund, and we're addressing the these changes with a group of leaders from national art service organizations. And as we were explaining to them that they were not quite getting what the digital fund is about, which is an example of good leadership, we were faced with an absence of followership due to too big of a gap in between what we were attempting to achieve with the fund and where people were at. And at some point, I could see people being scared in the room, because even though we're trying to explain to them what the fund was about and the kind of things we could do with it, they were still not getting it, and they were afraid and scared that they could not comprehend what we were about. Eventually, we got most of them into the room to a point where it made sense to them. But these are significant gaps in skills that we need to fill before leadership and followership can follow one another.
I think before we can talk about leadership, we have to know where we want to lead to. And let me go right back to Carolyn with this issue about open. One might say it's a very Ottawa-centric view, because it's very nice to have a few more people from Ottawa, even the undeserving, taken into the museum. But another way of looking at that says open isn't the issue, it's delivery is the issue. Look at Google Arts, which Google Arts has now taken images of paintings with, in many cases, millions of pixels. And you can, on your computer. Now remember, in a few years, computers are not going to be like this. They're going to be a whole wall, and they will have texture. So let's think of those terms. That you can look at thousands of paintings from hundreds of institutions on Google Art. You can go deeper in than you can ever see in a painting in a museum, because you can't get that close. You can take them apart. You can, very soon, we'll be able to follow the painting itself as we look through different levels. And you can do that at home on your own computer or in a school. You can devise a course very easily. If you look at Google Arts, come with me, we can go to the Prado. We can walk right in the front door. We can go through the galleries. Where should we be leading? There's only a limited number of dollars. And with that limited number of dollars, where can we serve society best? Granted, it's a lovely idea to take people. See, we see that at the Met. All sorts of people, mainly the white, let's remember that. We don't need to get other people in the museum. But should the bulk of the money go in the future, the near future, to packaging using technology to make this stuff is available? I love to be at the Met Opera. I love to watch the chandeliers go up. I love to see it. But I also like the HD performances. And what I like even more now is I can subscribe, and an institution could subscribe for a few dollars a month with hundreds of operas available to see, and again, on a good computer with sound system. We can't do everything. And where do we want leadership to go to take us? And is it good enough to say we've gone from 40,000 people this Saturday at the Met to 45,000? Is that, and 5,000 are kids, that's very nice. But can we get to 100,000, 200,000, 1 million people using different forms of technology? That's my question. Where do we want to go with this?
A couple of quick comments about leadership. If you look back on the history of the Canada Council, there were some extraordinary moments. One of them, I think, was the creation of the Explorations Program and the sad demise of that program. It was innovative, it was way ahead of its time. Yes, it was costly to administer, but it gave an opportunity for seeds to be planted. Most extraordinary things came out of that program. Another was the afternoon in which André Fortier, who was the director of the Canada Council at that time, he told it was called the Association of Canadian Orchestras at that time. He told all of the leaders of the orchestras, if you know what's good for you, you will start hiring Canadian musicians. You will not run to New York or Boston or Chicago to do your auditions first. You will hire Canadians. We have the talent. We're going to nurture the talent. Get on with it. That he got out of that room alive was a miracle. But it took root. What he said took root. It was skillful, it was leadership, and it was tough. And it was, to my mind, a great moment, a very telling moment. Other telling moment along the way, which was not directly the Canada Council, or the Canada Council was an implementer of it, was Gérard Pelletier's democratization and decentralization. Because if you look back into the early days of the Canada Council, most of the professional activity, most of the professional artists were in Ontario and Quebec. And he felt this was wrong, and he felt that this must be addressed so that all Canadians, wherever they lived, if it was humanly possible, should have access to the riches of the Canadian talent that was being developed, and talent from talented people and artifacts from all around the world. I'm involved in something which I think, in its own quiet way, is trying to show leadership. Everybody tells me I'm crazy, but I'm working with a group of people who really have made it their mission to address the arts and education, the arts and learning. We allowed this absolute bedrock, fundamental element to diminish over a long period of time. We could just see the erosion. There would be fewer and fewer music teachers hired. The maths teacher would be assigned to teach art, etc., etc. It reached rock bottom, and there are those of us who will use our dying breaths, I think, to try to rebuild that. It's absolutely essential for everything that we're talking about today. It's essential that we find ways, not only in the schools, but providing the opportunities which many arts organizations do, but to encourage those on an ongoing basis and throughout the school year, the whole academic cycle. It's not enough to just say, well, we'll take you to the art gallery once a year. It's not enough. We have to do better than that, and we can do better than that. And to say, oh, it's too difficult, we'll ignore it, I think is wrong.
John, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because I think you're right, but I think you have to go another step.
Okay.
The step is, how do you know what to encourage? And how does a single institution not get trapped in its own limited vision? Is that male organ on the wall art that you want to show to grade school kids?
Yeah.
I mean, is graffiti something that you want to how do you make those decisions? And if there's not a market, what is there to make the decision? Certainly don't.
Well, no, I was just going to hop in, and to your point, Stephen, earlier, but well, so where are we going? And then you also mentioned in your initial comments, especially for organizations that are publicly funded. So that's actually where I'd like to take this. So on these questions then, when it does come to arts councils, organizations with publicly funded money, well, let's actually zero it into arts councils as opposed to broader organizations like Canadian Heritage or what have you. But when we're talking about arts councils with publicly funded money, where should they be focusing their efforts? I mean, Stephen, you put out what I thought was a relatively provocative vision, which is it should be very narrow. It should be a very limited number of things. I'd love to hear you on what those things should be. But I'd like to hear others as well. And Frederic, you've talked about technology. Is that where the focus should be? John, you've talked about education and arts education. Is that where the focus should be? Carolyn wants to jump in, so let's get a mic down to Carolyn.
Just not jumping in too much, but I want to jump in on what you said about the bad times and the good times. And I think that that's really important politically. And I think one of the things, maybe it's the lack of the changing role of the state, but I think one of the important things is when it's the good times, yell, scream.
Exactly.
And get money, and let everybody yell and scream and say, I want this, I want this, I want this. And I think now, I mean, the good times, you talked a lot about some of the stuff that the early Trudeau years did. But there were all kinds of people who wanted all kinds of things, and they didn't all want the same thing, and who cares what they wanted. But they got the idea of pushing the state to do things. And then you got different ministers who had different ideas and said, oh yeah, there's a bit of money, somebody just died and we can stick that into the Canada Council, we'll create a Canada Council, and nobody will know because it's a bequest to the state or whatever it was.
Didn't quite go down like that, but that's okay.
It was got very lucky and they managed to slip it in and
No,
say, we'll
absolutely.
finance it out of the
Absolutely.
original, whatever they call debt duties or the, but I think that what we've lost maybe now is that just pushing, everybody pushing the state now. We're going to have a period of not that many years where there's a government who actually believes in doing things. So they're doing some of the things badly and goodly, but whatever. I just think we need the politics of it, and everybody should be doing it.
Well, and agreed, Carolyn, that if you were to go back in time, there were a lot of people pushing. They weren't necessarily pushing for the same things, but my sense would be now that even less are they pushing for the same things now. And so governments are very much in a situation where they need to make choices. Some of those choices are going to be very difficult choices. Where does that last dollar go? Frédéric, do you want to jump in on that?
I was attempting not to be the arts advocate today, because my role as an arts advocate is actually not to decide where that money has to go, but listen to the people that I work with, hear the message, and then carry it. So I'll stick to that. With regards to where the Canada Council should invest, I think the latest strategic plan was quite specific as to what the Canada Council wanted to achieve, especially namely that commitment to reconciliation, which is quite crucial. I mean, if there's one area where we can be optimistic, definitely it is there. The wrongdoings that we have to recover from are significant, but with goodwill, with the arts, with the proper respectful setting, I think it is possible. In terms of places where we need to invest, I'd like to reflect on places where we have invested and created legacies that we are sometimes bound with. And that's outside of the realm of Canada Council, but those venues that we've built 50 years ago, we have museums, we have performing arts centers, and of course I work in the performing arts, and that's an area that I pay close attention to. I was not fully surprised, but a bit concerned to notice that in a research report called Arts and Heritage, Access and Availability, commissioned by Canadian Heritage with support from Canada Council for the Arts. This survey of 2,000 Canadian revealed that in 2016, of those people who do attend the performing arts, those who report having done so in a performing arts center have diminished by 11 percentage points. There are now more people attending performing arts in outdoor venues in parks than in performing arts venues. So that's another challenge. I don't have any solution there, but I'm seeing this as a major challenge because we have to keep those venues open. We've built them. We can just not tear them apart. But it points to a need to do things differently within these venues. You know, social values have changed. We've done energy retrofitting of these places. Do we have to start to do social retrofitting of our performing arts venues? Is that an avenue? I don't know.
Do we want to have a battle over our scratches and colors made by people in madhouses, insane asylums? Is that art? Is our chalk outside on the sidewalks? Is that art? Our stones that are moved around on the beach? Is that art? Do you really want to to pick your fights, particularly in a more populist era, what battles do you want to get into? One I mentioned when we talked on the telephone is an artist named Baltus, who's a Belgian who paints pictures of young ladies in awkward poses. And now the Met has been sued by 90 people saying that that's sexual harassment, to show pictures like this. And I guess they haven't figured out there are a lot of naked people at the Met. Not people, but in paintings. Some of them are quite rude. Do you really? Do you want to get in that? What fights do you want to get into in the future? Or is it better to say, for example, what we want to do for the next 10 years is be at the forefront of virtual reality, and make it possible in the evolving latest technology for everybody to have access to the great art collections, the great monuments of the world, or something like that. Again, that's just a crazy idea. But to say a little bit of everything and to fight battle after battle in this world of exploding art forms, of rising pop controversy, boy, you certainly don't want to look forward to 10 years of battles and over this kind of issue, it seems to me.
John, last word to you, and then we're going to go to questions because people are starting
All right,
to...
very quick, I
Hands are going
think.
up.
And this is probably showing my age. I am absolutely convinced that we have to stick with the bedrock of what the Canada Council was created to do and what it has attempted to do throughout its existence, and that is the promotion of artistic excellence. And that I know it seems in an era in which everyone's an artist and you can do your own thing on YouTube, etc., but the highest level of professional standards have to be maintained by somebody. And if they're not maintained by an independent arts council, hopefully adequately funded, everything will diminish. Everything will diminish. And I'm rooted, I think, in a very fundamental thing which happened many, many years ago, and that is that I came to a conclusion that for an arts organization, if they really are doing their very best, and if they really believe in the product that they are creating, surely they want to share that with as many people as humanly possible. And that whatever means they are, whether it's improved marketing or whether it's changing a venue or whether it's using the technology, the notion of sharing their excellence is, to me, absolutely fundamental.